When the mother of the world's most famous basketball player was turned away from a luxury hotel, no one could have predicted how this moment of disrespect would transform lives across the country. Not through anger or public shaming, but through something far more powerful: a mother's quiet dignity and her son's determination to honor her legacy of respect. The Chicago wind bit at Dolores Jordan's face as she stepped out of the taxi. She pulled her simple blue coat tighter around her shoulders and looked up at the gleaming Grand Palace Hotel. The building reached high into the night sky, its windows glowing like stars against the darkness. "Thank you," she said, handing the I-1 driver some bills. She was tired after her long flight from North Carolina, but excited too. Tomorrow, her son Michael would play in one of the biggest games of the season. She never missed his important games, if she could help it. Dolores grabbed her small suitcase and walked toward the hotel entrance. Two doormen in fancy uniforms rushed to open the heavy glass doors. They didn't pay much attention to her. To them, she was just another guest, not the mother of the most famous basketball player in the world. That was fine with Dolores. She had never been one to show off or brag about her son. She raised all her children to be humble and to work hard. Fame and money might come and go, but good character lasted forever. That's what she always told them. The lobby of the Grand Palace was beautiful. Marble floors shined under bright chandeliers. Well-dressed people sat in plush chairs, talking quietly. Dolores walked to the front desk, her sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. A young man stood behind the ID counter. His name tag read Trevor Blackwell. He was busy typing something on his computer and didn't look up right away. "Excuse me," Dolores said. "I have a reservation for tonight. The name is Jordan. Dolores Jordan." Trevor finally looked up. His eyes moved quickly over Dolores, taking in her simple clothes and travel-worn appearance. Nothing about her screamed important or wealthy. Just an older woman in regular clothes, with a small suitcase. "Jordan, you said?" Trevor asked, turning back to his computer. "Yes, Dolores Jordan. My son made the reservation for me." Trevor typed something and frowned. "I see a reservation under that name, but there must be some mistake." "What kind of mistake?" Dolores asked. She had been traveling all day. All she wanted was to get to her room, take a shower, and rest before tomorrow's game. "This reservation is for a VIP suite," Trevor said. His voice had changed, becoming more suspicious. "Those rooms are for our special guests." Dolores sighed. She knew what was happening. It wasn't the first time. "My son is Michael Jordan. He made the reservation for me?" Trevor's face changed. First surprise, then disbelief, then something like annoyance crossed his features. Every day, people tried to use famous names to get special treatment. "Ma'am," he said, his voice stiff, "we get a lot of people claiming connections to celebrities. If you're really Michael Jordan's mother, you would have ID, or Mr. Jordan would be with you, or you would have arrived in something nicer than a fee." Taxi. Dolores felt her cheeks grow warm. She stood straighter, dignity in every inch of her 5'5" frame. "Young man, I have my ID right here, and my son respects that I like to travel simply. Now, please, I've had a long day." She reached into her purse and pulled out her driver's license. Trevor barely glanced at it. "Anyone can have the last name Jordan," he said. "I'm sorry, but we're actually fully booked tonight." "But you just said you saw my reservation," Dolores pointed out. Trevor's face hardened. "Like I said, there must have been a mistake. We have no rooms available." A few people in the lobby were starting to look over at them. Dolores lowered her voice. "Please check again. My son made this reservation weeks ago. Ma'am, I've checked. There's nothing I can do. Trevor squared his shoulders. Now, if you don't have a valid reservation, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Dolores couldn't believe what was happening. May I speak to a manager? The manager is busy with important guests right now, Trevor said. If you don't leave, I'll need to call security. A lump formed in Dolores's throat, but she wouldn't cry. Not here, not now. She had faced much worse in her life than a rude hotel clerk. She raised 5 children after her husband died. She worked long hours in factories to put food on the table. She taught her children to hold their heads high no matter what. Fine, she said, her voice steady despite her anger. I'll leave, but you should know that making assumptions about people based on how they look or what they're wearing is a poor way to go through life, young man. Trevor rolled his eyes and picked up the phone, presumably to call security. Dolores turned and walked toward the door before anyone could come to throw her out. Her hands shook slightly, but her back was straight, and her steps were firm. Outside, the wind had gotten colder. Dolores stood under the hotel's fancy entrance, trying to decide what to do. It was late. She was in an unfamiliar part of Chicago. She could try to find another hotel, but the thought of going through this again somewhere else made her chest tight. Instead, she reached for her cell phone, the one Michael had insisted she carry. She hadn't wanted it at first. Growing up, poor in rural North Carolina, such luxuries seemed wasteful. But now she was glad to have it. She dialed Michael's number. As the phone rang, she looked back at the gleaming hotel. Through the glass doors, she could see Trevor already helping another guest, a woman in a fur coat and diamonds. The woman was being shown to the elevator with smiles and bows. Dolores shook her head sadly. If only that young man knew that. True worth had nothing to do with fancy coats or shiny jewels. "Mom," Michael's voice came through the phone. "Are you at the hotel already?" Dolores took a deep breath. "Michael, honey, we need to talk. I'm outside the Grand Palace Hotel, and, well, they won't let me in." "What do you mean they won't let you in?" Michael's voice went from calm to concerned in an instant. Dolores stood in the cold, watching her breath form small clouds in the air. She hadn't wanted to bother him. Tomorrow was a big game against the Knicks. He needed to focus, to rest. "It's nothing, baby, just a mix-up," she said, trying to sound stronger than she felt. "The young man at the desk doesn't believe I'm your mother. Says they don't have any rooms." The silence on the other end of the phone told her everything. Michael was angry. She knew her son, knew the quiet fire that burned in him when someone crossed a line. It was that same fire that made him push harder on the court when people said he couldn't do something. "Which hotel are you at again?" His voice was controlled now. Too controlled. The Grand Palace downtown. "But Michael, it's not. I know exactly where that is. Stay right there, Mama. I'm coming." "You don't need to do that," Dolores said quickly. "You need your rest for tomorrow. I can find another hotel." "No," Michael said firmly. "You had a reservation. I made it myself. You've been traveling all day." There was a pause, and she could hear him moving around his house. "Besides, you know I can't sleep well before a big game anyway." Dolores smiled despite herself. Some things never changed. Even as a boy in North Carolina, Michael would be too excited to sleep before important games. She remembered finding him shooting baskets in the driveway at midnight more than once. "I'll be there in 20 minutes," Michael continued. "Don't go anywhere." "I won't," she promised. After they hung up, Dolores moved away from the hotel entrance to a small bench nearby. She didn't want to cause a scene. She never had. Even when James died, and she was left alone with 5 children to raise, she had faced each day with quiet dignity. No time for self-pity, when there were mouths to feed and minds to nurture. She looked at her watch. Almost 11 at night. The streets of Chicago were still busy, cars rushing by, people walking quickly in the cold. This was Michael's world now. Soot, big cities, bright lights, fast pace. So different from the small town where she had raised him. Dolores closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of their old home in Wilmington, the backyard where Michael and his brothers would play for hours, the kitchen table where she made them do homework before they could go outside, the extra hours she worked at the factory to buy Michael his first real basketball shoes. Money doesn't make you important, she had told her children 1,000 times. How you treat others does. She wondered if that young man at the desk had ever been taught that lesson. Opening her eyes, Dolores saw a sleek black car pull up to the curb. Even before the door opened, she knew it was Michael. A mother always knows. He stepped out, all 6'6" of him, wearing jeans and a simple dark sweater. No flashy jewelry, no fancy clothes, just her son. People on the sidewalk did double takes as they walked by. A few stopped and stared. One man nudged his friend and pointed. Michael didn't seem to notice. His eyes were fixed on his mother. "Mama," he said, wrapping her in a tight hug. The anger was there in his voice, but not for her. Never for her. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just tired," she said, patting his back. Even at the height of his fame, he was still her little boy in so many ways. "You didn't need to come all this way." "Yes, I did," Michael said firmly. He picked up her suitcase. It looked tiny in his large hands. "Now, let's go see about that room." As they walked toward the hotel entrance, a small crowd began to form. Phones came out to take pictures. Someone called Michael's name. The 2 doormen, who had barely noticed Dolores earlier, suddenly stood at attention, eyes wide. One of them rushed forward. "Mr. Jordan, it's an honor, sir. Please, right this way." Michael shook his head. "My mother was here 15 minutes ago. She didn't get this kind of welcome." The doorman's smile faltered. I'm sorry, sir. We didn't. "Save it," Michael said quietly. "Just open the door." As they walked into the lobby, heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People reached for pens and paper, hoping for autographs. Michael kept his arm around his mother's shoulders, ignoring everything else. His focus was complete, just like on the basketball court. At the front desk, Trevor Blackwell was helping another guest. When he looked up and saw Michael Jordan walking toward him, the color drained from his face. The hotel manager, a woman in a crisp suit, appeared as if from nowhere. She hurried toward them with a bright smile. "Mr. Jordan, what an unexpected pleasure. How can we help you tonight?" Michael looked at her calmly. "You can start by explaining why my mother was turned away from this hotel when she had a reservation." "I made myself," the hotel manager's smile faltered. There must be some mistake. Let me check on this right away." As the manager hurried to the computer, Dolores touched Michael's arm gently. "Let's talk over there," she said, nodding toward a quiet corner of the lobby. Michael followed his mother, leaving Trevor and the manager staring after them. In the corner, Dolores sat down on a plush sofa, and Michael joined her. "You don't need to make a scene, Michael," she said softly. "I raised you better than that." Michael shook his head, a small smile forming. "You sure did, Mama. You sure did." While the hotel staff scrambled to fix the situation, Dolores's mind drifted back to Wilmington, North Carolina. back to the days when Michael was just her middle boy, not yet a legend. She remembered their small house on Gordon Road. Nothing fancy, just a simple home with a yard where the kids could play. After James died, that house had felt both too empty and too full. Empty without her husband's laughter, but full of 5 children who needed her more than ever. She had taken the job at the factory then. Long hours on her feet, but it paid the ID bills. Sometimes she worked at Wilmington's General Electric plant, sometimes at a bank. Often, she worked both jobs. The memory of those tired nights came back to her now. Coming home after dark, feet aching, to find dinner dishes in the sink and homework spread across the kitchen table. Michael, around 12 then, would be sitting there with his books open. "I waited for you, Mama," he would say. "I need help with this math." But she knew he didn't really need help. He was smart enough to do it on his own. He had waited because he knew she needed to feel needed. Especially on the hardest days, Dolores smiled at the memory. Even then, Michael had understood things that most adults missed. "What are you thinking about?" the present-day Michael asked, watching her face. "Just remembering," she said. "Remember that old basketball hoop your daddy put up?" Michael grinned. "The one that hung crooked no matter how many times he adjusted it?" "That's the one," Dolores nodded. "You would be out there shooting baskets until I had to call you in for dinner 3 or 4 times. 5 times, Michael corrected with a laugh. "You always had to call me 5 times. That rickety hoop had been the beginning. James had installed it before he passed, one of the last gifts he gave his sons. After he was gone, that hoop became even more important. It was where Michael channeled his grief, his energy, his dreams. Dolores remembered the day Michael didn't make the varsity team in high school. He had come home devastated, tears in his eyes. "They picked Leroy Smith instead of me," he had told her, his voice breaking. "Because he's taller." She could have comforted him with soft words, told him it didn't matter. Instead, she had looked him straight in the eye and said, "So, what are you going to do about it, Michael?" The next morning, she found him outside before dawn, shooting baskets. And the morning after that, and the one after that. "You always pushed me," Michael said now, as if reading her thoughts. "Not to be famous or rich, but to be better than I was yesterday." Dolores reached over and took his hand. His palm was so much larger than hers now, but she could still feel the little boy's hand she had held crossing streets and visiting doctors. "I remember when you got that first Nike contract," she said. "You came to me all excited about the money." Michael laughed. "And you asked me if the shoes were any good. You didn't care about the millions. You wanted to know if they'd hurt my feet during games." "Well, of course," Dolores said. "Money comes and goes. But your health, your character, those things last." She remembered how he had promised, standing in her kitchen with that first big contract in his hand. "Mama, you'll never have to work again. I'm going to take care of you now." She had shaken her head and said, "I don't need taking care of, but I'll always need your respect." That word, respect, had been at the center of their family. James had taught it to the children from the start. "Respect yourself enough to do your best," he would say. "Respect others enough to see their best." After he died, Dolores had kept those lessons alive. "You remember what I told you when you bought me that first big house?" she asked Michael now. He nodded. "You said, 'It's a beautiful home, Michael, but it won't mean anything if you don't fill it with respect and love.'" Dolores patted his hand. "Good boy. You were listening." Across the lobby, the hotel manager was approaching again, her face a mixture of apology and panic. Trevor trailed behind her, looking like he wanted to disappear. "They're coming back," Michael said. "Be kind," Dolores told him. "That young man made a mistake, but cruelty won't fix it." "I know, Mama." Michael stood up, helping his mother to her feet. "But they need to understand what they did wrong." As they walked across the lobby to meet the manager, Dolores thought about all the lessons she had tried to teach her children. Work hard, be honest, treat others with dignity. Don't expect special treatment, but don't accept disrespect. She'd never dreamed that her son would become the Michael Jordan known around the world. But she had always believed he would be someone special, someone who understood that true greatness wasn't about fame or money. It was about standing tall in moments like this one. The hotel manager reached them, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "Mr. Jordan, Mrs. Jordan, I cannot express how deeply sorry we are for this misunderstanding. Your suite is ready, of course, and we would be honored to offer it complimentary for the duration of your stay." Dolores watched her son's face. The world saw Michael Jordan, the basketball legend, the businessman, the global icon. She saw her son, the boy who had once promised her he would make her proud. And in this moment, as he prepared to respond to the nervous hotel manager, she was indeed proud. Not because of his fame or his wealth, but because of the man he had become. A man who understood that respect wasn't just given to those who looked important. It was a right that belonged to everyone, famous or not, rich or poor, just as she had taught him all those years ago in their simple home in North Carolina. The hotel manager waited anxiously for Michael's response. The lobby had grown quieter, with guests pretending not to watch while stealing glances at the basketball legend. "We don't need a free room," Michael said calmly. "My mother had a reservation that I paid for. All we want is for that reservation to be honored." The manager nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Jordan. The presidential suite is ready for Mrs. Jordan right away." Michael shook his head. "Not the presidential suite. The exact room I reserved. Nothing more, nothing less." Trevor, the desk clerk, had been hovering behind the manager. His face was pale, his eyes wide with the realization of his mistake. He stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. Jordan, I didn't realize—" His voice trailed off. Michael turned to look at him. The same intense focus he showed on the basketball court was now directed at the young man. "You didn't realize that my mother deserved basic respect?" Trevor swallowed hard. "I'm very sorry, sir. And to you, Mrs. Jordan, I made an assumption, and it was wrong." Before Michael could respond, the front doors of the hotel burst open. A group of people rushed in, hotel security, followed by the head manager, Patricia Wilson. Word had clearly spread quickly about what was happening. "Mr. Jordan!" Patricia called, hurrying toward them in high heels that clicked against the marble floor. "I've just heard what happened. This is completely unacceptable." Outside the hotel, more people were gathering. Some were fans who had spotted Michael's car. Others were hotel guests curious about the commotion. A few had phones out, recording the scene. Michael noticed none of it. His attention remained firmly on his mother and the situation at hand. "Mrs. Jordan," Patricia continued, slightly out of breath, "please accept our deepest apologies. We pride ourselves on treating all our guests with respect and dignity. What happened tonight falls far short of our standards." Dolores nodded politely. "Thank you. I appreciate that. We'd like to offer you our finest suite, complimentary champagne, and a full spa treatment tomorrow before your son's game," Patricia added eagerly. "It's the least we can do." Michael stepped closer to his mother. "My mother doesn't drink champagne, and she doesn't need special treatment. She just needs what anyone deserves, to have her reservation honored and to be treated with respect. Patricia's smile faltered slightly. Of course, Mr. Jordan. Right away. As Patricia turned to lead them to the elevators, more security arrived. They formed a path through the growing crowd in the lobby. Fans called Michael's name, holding out papers, basketballs, and phones for autographs and pictures. For the first time that night, Michael acknowledged them with a small wave, but he didn't stop. His arm remained around his mother's shoulders as they walked. In that moment, he wasn't the global superstar with 6 NBA championships. He wasn't the face on billboards and television commercials. He was simply a son, standing up for his mother. As they reached the elevators, Trevor hurried up with a keycard. Mrs. Jordan, your room is ready on the 15th floor. It's our Lakeview suite, as was originally reserved. Dolores took the card with a gracious nod. Thank you. The elevator doors opened, and Michael guided his mother inside. Patricia started to follow, but Michael shook his head. We can find our way. Thank you. As the doors closed, leaving them alone, Dolores let out a long breath. Well, that was something. Michael smiled. You okay, Mama? I'm fine, she assured him. But that poor young man looked like he might faint. Michael's smile faded. He should feel bad. What he did wasn't right. No, it wasn't, Dolores agreed. But I've been where he is. Young, trying to do a job, making bad judgments. We all have. The elevator climbed smoothly upward, the floor numbers lighting up one after another. You're too forgiving, Mama, Michael said, though there was affection in his voice. And you're too protective, she replied, patting his arm. But that's why I love you. When they reached the 15th floor, they found a small crowd of hotel staff waiting. A nervous bellhop took Dolores's small suitcase. Others stood at attention, trying not to stare at Michael. This way, Mrs. Jordan, one of them said, leading them down a hallway. The suite was beautiful, spacious and elegant, with large windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Flowers had appeared on the coffee table, and fresh fruit sat in a bowl on the dining table. Once they were alone again, Michael checked the room carefully, making sure everything was perfect for his mother. You don't need to fuss, Dolores told him. It's just a hotel room. I know, Michael said, but tomorrow is a big day, and you need to rest well. Dolores sat down on the sofa, suddenly feeling the full weight of the day's travel and the night's events. I'll be fine. You're the one who needs rest. You have a game tomorrow. Michael sat beside her. I can't help thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't called me. How many other people get treated that way because they don't have someone to call? Dolores was quiet for a moment. She had asked herself the same question many times over the years. How many people faced small injustices every day? How many had no voice to speak up? Maybe something good can come from this, she said finally. Michael nodded, his mind already working. Maybe it can. But first, you need to sleep, and I need to get home. As he stood to leave, Dolores caught his hand. Michael, I'm proud of how you handled that. You stood up without putting anyone down. That's true strength. Michael smiled. I learned from the best, Mama. I learned from the best. The next morning, Dolores woke to sunlight streaming through the hotel room windows. She hadn't planned to sleep so late, but yesterday's travel and the events of the night had tired her more than she realized. After a quick shower, she dressed in comfortable slacks and a simple blue blouse. She had never been one for fancy clothes. Even after Michael's success made money no object. Fancy prices don't make fancy people, she always said. Downstairs, the lobby felt different in the daylight, busy with people checking in and out. Business meetings starting. Tourists planning their day in Chicago. Dolores walked toward the restaurant for breakfast, enjoying the simple pleasure of not being recognized. That changed the moment she reached the restaurant entrance. "Mrs. Jordan!" The hostess rushed forward. "We have a special table waiting for you." Before Dolores could respond, the restaurant manager appeared. "Mrs. Jordan, it's an honor to have you with us this morning. Please, follow me. We've prepared something special." Dolores followed, noticing how other diners looked up as she passed. News traveled fast in a hotel like this. By now, everyone probably knew about last night. The special table was in a private corner with a view of the Chicago skyline. A beautiful flower arrangement sat in the center. The manager pulled out her chair with a flourish. "Our chef has prepared his signature breakfast just for you," he said proudly. "And of course, everything is complimentary." Dolores shook her head. "That's very kind, but I'd prefer to order from the regular menu, and I'll be paying for my meal." The manager looked confused. "But, Mrs. Jordan, after last night's unfortunate incident, it's the least we can do." "Last night's incident is exactly why I want to be treated like any other guest today," Dolores said firmly. "No special treatment, no free meals, just respect." The manager nodded slowly, finally understanding. "Of course, Mrs. Jordan. Here's the regular menu. Your server will be with you shortly." As he walked away, Dolores spotted Trevor, the desk clerk from last night, entering the restaurant. He saw her too, and for a moment looked like he might turn and run. Instead, after a visible deep breath, he walked toward her table. "Mrs. Jordan," he said, his voice tight with nervousness. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Dolores nodded, to the empty chair across from her. "Please, sit down." Trevor sat stiffly, his hands folded in his lap. "I wanted to apologize again for last night. What I did was wrong, and I'm truly sorry." "Thank you," Dolores said simply. She studied the young man's face. He couldn't be more than 25, she guessed. About the age Michael had been when he won his first championship with the Bulls. "The CGT hotel manager warned me that I might be fired," Trevor continued. "I understand why, and I accept it. I just wanted you to know that I never meant to be disrespectful." Dolores was quiet for a moment. "Why did you assume I wasn't who I said I was?" Trevor looked down at his hands. "Honestly, because you didn't look like what I expected. You didn't arrive in a fancy car or wear expensive clothes. You didn't act important. And how should someone important act?" Dolores asked. Before Trevor could answer, the elevator doors opened and Patricia Wilson, the head hotel manager, stepped out. She spotted them immediately and hurried over. "Mrs. Jordan, I see you've met Trevor." Her voice was overly bright. "I hope he's apologizing properly for his inexcusable behavior." "He is," Dolores said calmly. "We're having a private conversation, if you don't mind." Patricia looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need." She shot Trevor a warning look before walking away. When they were alone again, Dolores turned back to Trevor. "You were saying?" Trevor shifted uncomfortably. "I guess I thought important people would be louder about it. They'd mention connections, demand things, dress to impress. You were just normal." Dolores smiled. "I am normal. Being Michael Jordan's mother doesn't change who I am. It doesn't make me more worthy of respect than anyone else." "I know that now," Trevor said. "And I feel terrible about how I treated you." "Have you treated others the same way?" Dolores asked. Trevor looked guilty. "Probably. Not intentionally, but probably." Dolores nodded. "That's the bigger problem, isn't it? We make quick judgments based on how people look or speak. We decide who deserves our best treatment. Just then, Patricia returned with another man in an expensive suit, clearly someone higher up in the hotel management. "Mrs. Jordan," the man said with a practiced smile, "I'm Robert Daniels, Regional Director for Grand Palace Hotels. I came as soon as I heard about last night's unfortunate incident." Dolores looked up at him calmly. "Mr. Daniels, I'm in the middle of a conversation with Trevor. Could this wait?" The director looked taken aback. His eyes darted to Trevor, then back to Dolores. "Of course, but I wanted to inform you that appropriate disciplinary action is being taken. Trevor will no longer be working at our front desk." "Is he being fired?" Dolores asked directly. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for the kind of behavior displayed last night," the director said, avoiding a direct answer. Trevor stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped. Dolores stood up slowly. At 5'5", she was much shorter than the hotel director, but something in her posture made him take a step back. "Mr. Daniels, your hotel made a mistake last night. One employee made a poor judgment, yes, but firing him won't solve the real problem. Mrs. Jordan, I assure you, the real problem," Dolores continued, "is a culture that judges people's worth by their appearance, their status, or their connections. I don't want Trevor fired. I want him and your entire staff to learn from this." Patricia, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward. "What are you suggesting, Mrs. Jordan?" Dolores looked at Trevor, who was watching her with a mixture of surprise and hope. "I'm suggesting that there's more to this story than one desk clerk making a mistake. I'm suggesting that respect shouldn't be reserved for people who look important or have famous relatives." The restaurant had grown quiet. Other guests were listening openly now, some even taking pictures with their phones. Robert Daniels, sensing a potential public relations disaster, forced a smile. "Mrs. Jordan, why don't we continue this conversation in my office? I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that satisfies everyone." "I'm not interested in an arrangement," Dolores said. "I'm interested in change." As she spoke those words, the restaurant doors opened again. Michael walked in, dressed casually but unmistakable with his height and presence. Heads turned. Whispers swept through the room. He spotted his mother immediately and crossed to her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Everything okay here, Mama?" Dolores smiled up at her son. "Yes, Michael. I think everything might be just fine." The hotel director's face flickered between a smile and a frown. Having Michael Jordan in his hotel was good publicity. Having Michael Jordan confronting him about his mother's treatment was definitely not. "Mr. Jordan," he said, extending his hand, "it's an honor to have you with us today. I was just explaining to your mother that we take these situations very seriously." Michael shook the man's hand briefly, but his attention was on his mother. "What do you want to do here, Mama? Just say the word." Everyone in the restaurant waited for her answer. The powerful hotel director, the nervous desk clerk, the other guests pretending not to stare, all watched Dolores Jordan, wondering what she would demand. "I'd like to speak with Trevor privately," she said calmly. Michael nodded. "You heard? My mother." The director started to protest but stopped when he saw Michael's expression. "Of course, you can use the private dining room." Trevor looked terrified as he followed Dolores and Michael to a small room off the main restaurant. Inside were a table and chairs, with windows overlooking the Chicago River. Once the door closed behind them, Michael turned to Trevor. "You know, I could make one phone call, and you'd never work in hospitality again." Trevor swallowed hard. "I know, sir, and I'd deserve it." Michael started to say more, but Dolores touched his arm. "Michael, would you give us a few minutes alone?" He looked surprised. "You sure, Mama?" She nodded. I'm sure. After Michael left, Dolores sat down and motioned for Trevor to do the same. He sank into a chair, looking like he might be sick. "How long have you worked here, Trevor?" she asked. 6 months, he answered. His voice was barely above a whisper. "And before that?" "I was in college, hotel management major." He gave a bitter laugh. "Looks like I failed the most basic lesson." Dolores studied him. "Why this job? Why hotels?" Trevor seemed surprised by the question. For the first time, he looked directly at her. "My mom, actually. She cleaned rooms at a motel when I was growing up. Just the two of us after my dad left. She worked so hard, but the guests hardly noticed her. Some were kind, but others—" He trailed off. "Others treated her like she was invisible," Dolores finished for him. Trevor nodded. "I promised myself I'd work my way up to manage a place where everyone got treated right, where the housekeepers got the same respect as the guests." He looked down at his hands. "I guess somewhere along the way, I became exactly what I hated." The room was quiet for a moment, just the distant sounds of the restaurant beyond the door. "I was a factory worker," Dolores said finally. "After my husband James died, I took whatever jobs I could find to support my 5 children. People looked at me and saw just another worker on the line. Nobody special." Trevor listened, his eyes never leaving her face. "Some days my feet hurt. So bad I cried on the bus ride home," she continued. "But I had children waiting, homework to check, meals to cook. I didn't have time to feel sorry for myself." "My mom was the same way," Trevor said quietly. "Always moving, always working." Dolores nodded. "So you understand what it means to be judged by your appearance, by your job, by things that have nothing to do with who you really are." "Yes, ma'am, I do." Trevor's voice was stronger now. "Which makes what I did even worse." "It makes it a lesson you can learn from," Dolores corrected. "We all make mistakes, Trevor. The question is whether we grow from them." Outside the window, Chicago was fully awake now. People hurried along the streets. Boats moved on the river. Clouds drifted across the blue sky. A whole city moving forward, each person carrying their own story. "I don't want you to lose your job over this," Dolores said. Trevor looked up in surprise. "You don't?" "No. I want you to keep it, and to remember this feeling every time you look at a guest. I want you to remember that everyone deserves the same respect, whether they arrive in a limousine or a taxi, whether they wear designer clothes, or simple ones." She leaned forward slightly. "Can you do that, Trevor? Can you be the kind of person who sees beyond appearances?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, Mrs. Jordan. I can try. I will try." "Good," she said. "Because that's the real work of respect. Trying every day with every person." The door opened, and Michael returned. He looked between his mother and Trevor, sensing the change in the atmosphere. "Everything okay in here?" he asked. Dolores stood up. "Yes, Trevor and I have come to an understanding." She turned to the young man. "Isn't that right?" "Yes, ma'am," Trevor said, standing up as well. He hesitated, then added, "Mr. Jordan, I want to apologize to you too. What I did was wrong, and I'm grateful for this chance to make it right." Michael looked at his mother, who gave him a small nod. "Apology accepted," Michael said. "But it's my mother you needed to make things right with, not me." "I know that now," Trevor said. He turned back to Dolores. "Thank you, Mrs. Jordan, for the lesson and for the second chance." As they walked back into the main restaurant, the hotel director hurried over. "Is everything resolved to your satisfaction?" he asked anxiously. Before Dolores could answer, Trevor spoke up. Mrs. Jordan has taught me something important today, sir. Something about real respect and dignity. The director looked confused. That's good. Now, about your position. Trevor will be keeping his job, Dolores said firmly. But our policy will change, Michael finished. Starting today. My mother and I would be happy to discuss how. As Michael guided the director away to talk, Dolores turned back to Trevor. Remember what I said, she told him. Everyone deserves the same respect. Trevor nodded. I won't forget, Mrs. Jordan. I promise. And looking into his eyes, Dolores believed him. Because sometimes the best lessons came from the most unexpected teachers. And sometimes the most powerful changes started with the smallest moments of understanding. The morning of the Bulls game dawned clear and cold. Typical Chicago weather for this time of year. A bright sun that promised warmth, but delivered only light. In her hotel room, Dolores prepared for the day with her usual calm efficiency. She laid out a simple red outfit, Michael's team color. She had watched her son play hundreds of games over the years, from dusty playground courts in North Carolina to the gleaming floors of the United Center. Her routine never changed. Downstairs in the lobby, she noticed the difference immediately. The staff smiled at her, not with the nervous, overeager grins from yesterday, but with genuine warmth. Trevor was at the front desk again. When he saw her, he gave a small nod of respect. "Good morning, Mrs. Jordan," he said as she approached. "Did you sleep well?" "Very well, thank you," she replied. "I'm heading to the United Center soon. Could you call me a taxi?" "Of course." Trevor picked up the phone, but before he could dial, Patricia Wilson appeared. "Mrs. Jordan, we have a car waiting for you," the manager said. "One of our hotel cars." Dolores shook her head. "A taxi will be fine." Patricia looked like she might argue, but then nodded. "As you wish. But please know, it's not special treatment. It's the same courtesy we extend to all our guests heading to major events." Dolores smiled, recognizing the small but significant shift. "In that case, I accept. Thank you." The ride to the United Center was short. As always before big games, Dolores felt that mixture of excitement and anxiety that only a mother could understand. No matter how many championships Michael won, no matter how many records he broke, she still worried, still prayed for his safety, his performance, his happiness. At the arena, she was escorted to her usual seat, not courtside with the celebrities, but in the stands where she could see the whole court. Michael had offered her more prominent seats many times, but she always refused. "I can see your whole game better from up here," she would tell him. As she settled in, she noticed a commotion a few rows back. Looking over her shoulder, she saw Trevor and a young boy about 10 years old being shown to their seats. Trevor saw her looking and gave an awkward wave. After a moment's hesitation, he led the boy down to where she sat. "Mrs. Jordan, this is my son, Marcus," he said. "Marcus, this is Mrs. Jordan." The boy's eyes widened. "Michael Jordan's mom? For real?" Dolores smiled. "For real." "Your son is the greatest ever," Marcus said, with the absolute certainty of childhood. "I've watched all his games on TV. I'm going to play basketball just like him someday." "It takes a lot of hard work," Dolores told him. Michael practiced every day, even when he didn't feel like it. Marcus nodded seriously. "I practice every day, too. Even when it's raining, I go to the gym at the community center." Trevor put his hand on his son's shoulder, pride evident in his face. "When Mr. Jordan called the hotel this morning and offered us tickets, I couldn't believe it. Marcus has never been to a live Bulls game before." "I'm glad you could come. Dolores said sincerely. As Trevor and Marcus returned to their seats, the arena was filling up. The energy was building, that special electricity that came with big games against rivals like the Knicks. Down on the court, the Bulls were warming up. Michael moved with that fluid grace that had made him famous, his shots finding the basket with metronomic precision. But Dolores noticed something different about him today. An extra intensity, a sharper focus. In the coach's area, Phil Jackson watched his star player with interest. The legendary coach had learned to read Michael's moods, to sense when something was driving him beyond the usual competitive fire. As the players finished warm-ups and headed to the locker room for final preparations, Phil approached Michael. "Something on your mind today?" he asked quietly. Michael glanced up at the stands where his mother sat. "Just some extra motivation, Coach." Phil followed his gaze and nodded. He didn't need details. He knew the close bond between Michael and his mother. "Channel it," was all he said before walking away. When the game began, the difference in Michael's play was obvious to everyone. He attacked the Knicks' defense with a ferocity that seemed personal. By halftime, he had scored 28 points, outplaying everyone else on the court. In the stands, fans were buzzing with excitement. Some had heard rumors about what happened at the Grand Palace Hotel. Others just knew they were watching something special, even by Michael Jordan's extraordinary standards. Sitting near Dolores, a woman leaned over. "Your son is amazing today, even more than usual." Dolores smiled. He's always had a gift for turning challenges into fuel. The second half was even more impressive. The Knicks tried everything: double teams, different defenders, physical play, but nothing could stop Michael. He seemed to take each obstacle as a personal challenge, each defensive scheme as a puzzle to be solved. In the fourth quarter, with the Bulls leading by 15 points, Michael made a play that brought the entire arena to its feet. Stealing the ball at midcourt, he drove toward the basket, suspended in air between two defenders, switched the ball from his right hand to his left, and somehow made the shot while being fouled. As the crowd roared, Michael looked up at his mother in the stands. Their eyes met across the distance, and he gave her a small nod. It was a moment just between the two of them, amid 20,000 screaming fans. The Bulls won by 20 points. Michael finished with 45 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists, a dominant performance even by his standards. In the locker room afterward, reporters crowded around him. "Michael, that was one of your best games this season. What inspired you today?" Michael toweled off his face before answering. "Just trying to make my mother proud." The reporter looked confused. "Your mother specifically? Is there a reason for that today?" Michael smiled. "My mother taught me that how you respond to disrespect says more about your character than the disrespect itself. Let's just say I had that lesson on my mind today." Later, after the press conference, Michael found his mother waiting in the family area. She stood with Trevor and Marcus, the boy clutching a new Bulls cap and looking starstruck. "There's my MVP," Dolores said, giving her son a hug despite his sweat-soaked jersey. "Did you enjoy the game?" Michael asked, looking not at the reporters, who hovered nearby, but at Trevor's son. Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "That was the best thing ever. The way you flew past those guys, it was like you weren't even human." Michael laughed. "Just lots of practice, kid. Lots and lots of practice." He turned to Trevor. "And you? How'd you like the game?" "It was incredible," Trevor said. "Thank you again for the tickets. I know you didn't have to do that." "Actually, it was my mother's idea," Michael said. "She thought you and your son might enjoy it." Trevor looked at Dolores in surprise. After everything that had happened, Her kindness still caught him off guard. "Why don't we all go get something to eat?" Michael suggested. "I know a place that makes great burgers." As they left the arena together, the basketball superstar, his mother, the hotel clerk who had learned a powerful lesson, and a boy whose eyes were filled with dreams, people watched and wondered what connected them. But Dolores knew it was the invisible thread that had guided her life, and that she had passed on to her son. The understanding that true respect went beyond fame and fortune, beyond appearances and assumptions. It was about seeing the worth in every person, whether they wore championship rings or cleaned hotel rooms, whether they arrived in limousines or came by bus. And sometimes it took a moment of disrespect to reveal the deepest truths about respect itself. 3 days after the game, Michael sat in the offices of his management team in downtown Chicago. Papers were spread across the table, legal documents, proposals, budget projections. His agent, David Falk, walked him through the details. "So, that's the concept," David finished. "The Michael Jordan Respect Foundation, starting with Chicago schools, then expanding nationally, teaching kids about dignity, respect, and looking beyond appearances." Michael nodded, studying the mission statement. The words captured exactly what he had been thinking about since that night at the Grand Palace Hotel. "Have you talked to your mother about this?" David asked. "It seems like she's the inspiration." "Not yet," Michael replied. "I wanted to have everything ready first. You know how she is. She'll say it's unnecessary, that we're making too much." "Fuss," David laughed. "She'd probably tell us to just donate the money quietly and forget the foundation altogether." "Probably," Michael agreed, "but this is too important for that. What happened to her happens to people every day who don't have the advantage of being Michael Jordan's mother." His phone rang. It was Patricia Wilson from the Grand Palace. "Mr. Jordan," she said when he answered, "I wanted to update you on the changes we've implemented since your mother's visit." "I'm listening," Michael said. "We've revised our training protocols for all staff," Patricia explained. "We're now emphasizing that respect is a universal right, not a privilege earned by status. Trevor has actually been quite helpful with the new materials." "Trevor?" Michael was surprised. "Yes," Patricia said. "He's shown remarkable insight. He's been sharing his experience with the training classes, explaining how easy it is to fall into judging people by appearances, and how important it is to rise above that." After hanging up, Michael sat quietly, thinking. So much had happened from that one incident. A hotel had changed its policies. A young clerk had found a new purpose. And now, a foundation was about to be born. But something was still missing. Later that afternoon, Michael drove to his mother's house in the Chicago suburbs. She had moved back home after the game, preferring her own space to the hotel no matter how luxurious. He found her in the garden, tending to her flowers. Despite having the means to hire any number of gardeners, Dolores Jordan did her own gardening. Flowers grow better when they're loved by the person planting them. She always said, "Hey, Mama," Michael called, walking up the path. Dolores looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun. "Michael, I didn't expect you today." She pulled off her gardening gloves. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," he assured her. "I just wanted to talk to you about something." Inside, over glasses of sweet tea, made exactly the way Dolores had made it in North Carolina, Michael explained his idea for the foundation. "We can reach thousands of kids," he explained. "Teach them the values you taught me. Show them that respect isn't about fame or money." Dolores listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. When Michael finished, she asked, "And why do you want To do this? Because of what happened at the hotel, Michael said. Because of how they treated you. Dolores shook her head. No, Michael, that's not a good enough reason. Michael looked surprised. What do you mean? If you're doing this because you're angry about how I was treated, that's not the right foundation to build on, she explained. Anger fades. Even righteous anger burns itself out eventually. Then what should the reason be? Michael asked. Dolores smiled. Hope. You do this because you hope for something better. Because you believe people can learn and grow. Just like Trevor did. Michael thought about that. His mother, as usual, was right. All his life, she had been showing him the deeper way to look at things. There's something else I wanted to ask you, Michael said. Would you speak at the press conference when we announce the foundation? Tell your story? Dolores frowned slightly. You know, I don't like being in the spotlight, Michael. I know, Mama. But your story is powerful. It's not just about what happened at the hotel. It's about everything. How you raised us after Dad died. How you worked those long hours. How you taught us about respect. His mother was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she said, Let me think about it. The next week, preparations for the press conference were complete. The Bulls organization had offered their media room at the United Center. Every major news outlet would be there. Not surprising when Michael Jordan called a press conference. An hour before it was set to begin, Michael still didn't know if his mother would speak. She had promised to be there, but hadn't committed to talking. The media room filled quickly. Reporters set up cameras and checked microphones. Team officials made sure everything was perfect. In the front row sat Trevor and his son, Marcus, special guests for the occasion. At precisely 2:30 p.m., Michael walked onto the small stage. The room fell silent, all eyes on the man who had become more than just a basketball player. He was a global icon, his name and image recognized worldwide. Thank you all for coming today, Michael began. I've asked you here because I want to announce something important. He explained the Michael Jordan Respect Foundation, its mission, its programs, its goals. As he spoke, he noticed his mother slip quietly into the back of the room. This foundation isn't about me, Michael continued. It's about values I learned from my parents. It's about treating every person with dignity, regardless of their appearance, their job, or their background. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. In the back, Dolores watched her son with pride. I could tell you why this matters, Michael said. But there's someone who can explain it better than I ever could. He looked toward the back of the room. Mom, would you come up here? The room turned. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Dolores Jordan, in a simple blue dress, much like the one she'd worn to the hotel that night, walked slowly to the stage. Michael stepped aside, giving his mother the microphone. She looked out at the sea of faces, cameras, and lights. For a moment, she seemed hesitant. Then she straightened her shoulders and began to speak. I'm not used to talking to crowds, she said. Her voice was soft but clear. But some things need to be said, she told them, about her life, not just the incident at the hotel, but the years before, about raising 5 children alone after James died, about working factory jobs, standing on her feet for 10-hour shifts, about teaching her children that true worth came from character, not possessions. When that young man at the hotel didn't believe I was who I said I was, it wasn't the first time I'd been judged by my appearance, she said. But it made me think about all the people who face that kind of judgment every day, who don't have a famous son to call. In the front row, Trevor looked down at his hands, but Dolores's voice held no blame. This foundation isn't about pointing fingers, she continued. It's about offering a hand, about teaching young people to see beyond surface judgments, about helping them understand that respect is something we all deserve, simply because we're human. The room was completely silent now. Even veteran reporters who had covered wars and disasters were caught by the simple power of her words. "My son has always understood this," Dolores said, looking at Michael with love in her eyes. "Even as a boy, he knew that how you treat others matters more than any trophy or contract. That's the legacy I'm most proud of. Not the championships, not the records, but the man he became." As she finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Reporters who had come expecting a standard foundation announcement found themselves touched by something much deeper. Michael stepped back to the microphone, his arm around his mother's shoulders. "The Foundation's first program starts next month in Chicago schools. We're calling it the Respect Project. It will teach kids what my mother taught me, that true respect looks past appearances to see the worth in every person." After the press conference, as reporters gathered around Michael for additional questions, Patricia Wilson approached Dolores. "Mrs. Jordan," she said, "the Grand Palace would like to offer our facilities for any foundation events, free of charge." Dolores shook her head. "The foundation will pay its way, just like anyone else. No special treatment, just equal respect. That's the whole point." Patricia nodded, finally understanding. "Of course, and we'd be honored to partner with you on the training programs. What we've started at our hotel could help others in the industry." "Now that," Dolores said with a smile, "is an offer worth accepting." Across the room, Michael watched his mother. All his life, she had been the quiet force guiding him, teaching him, showing him the way. And now, her wisdom would reach far beyond their family. From a painful moment had come something beautiful. From disrespect had come a new understanding of respect itself. And Michael knew that was his mother's greatest gift, the ability to transform challenges into opportunities, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. 6 months passed. The Chicago winter had softened into spring, bringing new life to the city's parks and streets. At West Side Elementary School, 35th graders sat in a circle, listening intently to the woman speaking to them. "Respect isn't something you earn by being famous or rich," Dolores told them. "It's something we all deserve, just because we're human." The children nodded. They knew who she was, Michael Jordan's mother. But over the past few weeks, they had come to know her as much more than that. She was Ms. Dolores, who told stories about growing up poor in North Carolina, who listened to their problems, who never talked down to them. "Today we have a special guest," Dolores said, gesturing to the door. Trevor walked in, looking nervous but determined. "This is Mr. Trevor," Dolores introduced him. "He's going to tell you a story about making a mistake and learning from it." Trevor cleared his throat. "6 months ago, I worked at a fancy hotel. One night, a woman came in looking tired from traveling. She wasn't dressed in expensive clothes. She didn't arrive in a fancy car. And I made a big mistake. I judged her by how she looked." The children listened, some leaning forward in their chairs. "That woman was Ms. Dolores," Trevor continued. "I didn't believe she was who she said she was. I almost made her leave the hotel. I was wrong, and I hurt her feelings." A little girl raised her hand. "Did you get in trouble?" Trevor nodded. "I should have been fired. But Ms. Dolores did something amazing. She forgave me. She taught me a lesson instead of punishing me." Another child asked, "Were you scared when you found out she was Michael Jordan's mom?" "I was," Trevor admitted. But she helped me understand. That wasn't the point. The real problem wasn't that I disrespected someone famous. It was that I judged someone based on appearances at all. Across town at the Grand Palace Hotel, changes were visible everywhere. New signs in the lobby read, "At Grand Palace, respect is our foundation." Staff training now included sessions on unconscious bias and equal treatment for all guests. Patricia Wilson guided a group of hotel managers from across the city through the lobby. After what we call the Dolores Jordan incident, we completely revised our approach, she explained. Our guest satisfaction scores have actually increased by 23%. One of the visiting managers looked skeptical. All this because one VIP had a bad experience? Patricia shook her head. No. All this because we realize that every guest should be a VIP, not because of who they are, but because everyone deserves respect. She led the group to a training room where the walls were covered with photographs, hotel staff with guests of all backgrounds, ages, and styles of dress. At the center was a simple portrait of Dolores Jordan, not in fancy clothes, but in her everyday wear, with a quote beneath it, "See the person, not the packaging." Back at the Bulls' offices, Michael sat with his foundation team, reviewing the progress of the first 6 months. "We've reached over 50 schools in Chicago," his program director reported. "The curriculum is being adopted in Milwaukee and Detroit next month, and we've had inquiries from as far away as Los Angeles and New York." Michael nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. "What about the hotel industry program?" "That's actually our biggest success story," the director replied. "The training program developed with the Grand Palace has been adopted by 3 major hotel chains. They're calling it the Dolores Standard." Michael smiled at that. His mother would be embarrassed by the name, but pleased by the impact. "And Trevor?" he asked. "Still at the Grand Palace, but now he's been promoted. He's helping train new employees, sharing his experience. Your mother was right about him. He's become one of our best advocates." Later that evening, Michael picked up his mother for their weekly dinner. It had become their tradition. Every Wednesday, just the two of them, no matter how busy his schedule. They drove to a small family restaurant on the south side. Nothing fancy, but the food was good, and the owners didn't make a fuss over Michael. They had been coming there for years. "How was the school today?" Michael asked as they were seated. "Those children are so smart," Dolores said, her face lighting up. "They understand things it took me years to learn. One little girl told me, 'Ms. Dolores, my grandma says you can't tell a book by its cover, and you can't tell a person by their clothes.'" Michael laughed. "Wisdom from the mouths of babes." "Trevor did well today, too," Dolores added. "He's really finding his voice. The children respond to him because he's so honest about his mistake." Their food arrived, simple home cooking that reminded Dolores of North Carolina. As they ate, Michael watched his mother. 6 months ago, she had been upset and hurt by what happened at the hotel. Now she seemed energized, purposeful. "You know, Mama," he said, "this foundation was supposed to be about teaching others. But I think we're the ones learning the most." Dolores nodded. "That's how it always is. When you try to help others, you end up helping yourself." The hotel called it the Dolores Incident, Michael told her. Now they're calling their new training standard the Dolores Standard. His mother almost choked on her food. "They're what?" "Oh, no, that's too much." Michael grinned. "I knew you'd hate it. I told them to keep it." "Michael!" she protested, but she was laughing too. As they walked back to the car after dinner, a group of teenagers spotted them. One boy nudged another and pointed. "It's Michael Jordan," he said loudly. The group hurried over, phones out for pictures. Michael smiled patiently. This was part of his daily life. But then something unexpected happened. One of the girls looked at Dolores, and her eyes widened in recognition. "Wait, are you Mrs. Jordan? The one from the Respect Project?" she asked. Dolores looked surprised. "Yes, I am." "You came to our school last month," the girl exclaimed. "I'm in the peer leadership program now because of your talk. You said we all have the power to change how people see each other." The other teenagers were now looking at Dolores with as much excitement as they had shown for Michael. "Can we get a picture with both of you?" one asked, as Michael and his mother posed with the teens. He felt a surge of pride. His mother was being recognized not just as Michael Jordan's mom, but as Dolores Jordan, teacher, mentor, changemaker. Later, driving her home, Michael said, "You're famous now, Mama. Those kids knew you for your work, not just for being my mother." Dolores shook her head. "I don't need fame. I just want to make a difference." "You are," Michael assured her. "More than you know." 6 months ago, one man's disrespect had led to pain and anger, but from that moment had grown something beautiful. Change that rippled outward, touching lives across the city and beyond. And at the center of it all was Dolores Jordan, who had always known that the greatest power lay not in wealth or fame or status, but in the simple, profound act of seeing each person's true worth. 1 year after the incident at the Grand Palace Hotel, the Michael Jordan Respect Foundation held a special ceremony at the Chicago Children's Museum. The event marked the successful completion of the foundation's first year and the launch of its national expansion. The museum's main hall was filled with people from all walks of life: teachers from the program's pilot schools, hotel staff who had implemented the new training standards, community leaders, and, of course, children. Large banners hung from the ceiling, each featuring photographs and quotes from the foundation's work. Michael stood at the edge of the crowd, watching. This was bigger than anything he had imagined when they started. What had begun as a response to one incident had grown into a movement that was changing lives. "Nervous?" a familiar voice asked. Michael turned to find his former coach, Phil Jackson, standing beside him. The legendary coach had flown in from Montana specially for the event. "A little," Michael admitted. "This feels different from game day." Phil nodded. "Because it is. Games end when the buzzer sounds. This," he gestured to the room, "this keeps going. This is about legacy." On the other side of the hall, Dolores greeted guests with her characteristic warmth. She wore a simple blue dress, similar to the one she had worn that night at the hotel. It had become something of a signature for her now, a reminder that appearances didn't determine worth. Trevor stood nearby with his son Marcus and a group of hotel managers from across the country. He was explaining the training program that had grown from his experience. "The key is helping staff recognize their own biases," he was saying. "We all make judgments based on appearances. The question is whether we can rise above them." As the time for the ceremony approached, Patricia Wilson from the Grand Palace found Dolores. "Mrs. Jordan, I have something for you." She handed Dolores a small velvet box. Dolores opened it to find a pin. A simple gold circle with the words, "See the person," engraved on it. "This is the pin we give to all our employees now," Patricia explained. "It's a reminder of what you taught us. We've shared the design with hotel chains across the country." Dolores was touched. "Thank you," she said simply. Soon it was time for the program to begin. The crowd took their seats. Michael stepped to the podium, confident as always in the spotlight. "Welcome, everyone, to the first anniversary celebration of the Michael Jordan Respect Foundation," he began. What started as a response to a single incident has grown into something much bigger than we ever imagined. He went on to outline the Foundation's achievements. 50,000 students reached through school programs, thousands of hotel staff, trained in the new respect standards, community initiatives in 4 major cities, with more to come. But numbers only tell part of the story, Michael continued. The real impact is in the lives changed, the attitudes shifted, the moments of connection that happen when we look beyond appearances to see the true worth in every person. Trentitin poverty durs, he gestured to the children seated in the front rows. These young people are learning lessons that took many of us decades to understand. They're learning that respect isn't earned by status or wealth, but is the birthright of every human being. Michael paused, looking out at the crowd. I'd like to invite my mother, Dolores Jordan, to share her thoughts with you. After all, this foundation exists because of her wisdom and her example. Dolores walked to the podium as the audience applauded. Unlike a year ago at the press conference, she moved with confidence now. This was her mission too. Thank you all for coming today, she began. When Michael first told me about his idea for this foundation, I told him it shouldn't be built on anger about what happened to me at that hotel. It should be built on hope. Hope for a world where everyone is seen for who they truly are. She smiled at the children in the front row. In this past year, I visited many schools and talked with many children. They asked the best questions. One little boy asked me, Ms. Dolores, how do you know what a person is really like if you can't judge by how they look? I told him, you have to take the time to listen to them. You have to be willing to see with your heart, not just your eyes. The PO room was silent, everyone captivated by her words. Another child asked why I wasn't angry at the hotel man who was mean to me. The truth is, I was upset that night. But I've learned in my life that holding on to anger only hurts yourself. Finding a way to create something positive, that's the better path. Dolores took a deep breath. It was time to share what she had kept private until now. There's something about that night at the hotel that I never told anyone, not even Michael. It wasn't the first time I'd been treated that way because of how I looked or dressed. It had happened many times over the years, especially when I traveled alone to watch Michael play. Michael straightened in his seat, surprise evident on his face. I never mentioned those incidents to Michael or my other children, Dolores continued. I didn't want to distract them from their goals. I didn't want them worried about their mama when they had games to focus on or jobs to do. She looked directly at Michael now. So why did I call you that particular night? Why not just find another hotel like I'd done before? The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her answer. Earlier that day, I had received news I hadn't shared with anyone. For the previous 6 months, I had been quietly fighting breast cancer. A murmur went through the crowd. Michael's face showed shock, then pain. That morning, my doctor had called. With test results, Dolores continued, her voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. The treatments had worked. The cancer was in remission. She smiled, though tears glistened in her eyes. I was coming to Chicago not just to see Michael play, but to celebrate this news with him. That's why the rejection at the hotel hit me harder than usual that night. I was tired from treatment, emotional from the good news, and just wanted to rest before sharing my joy with my son. Michael stood and crossed to his mother, embracing her as the audience wiped away tears of their own. For a moment, they weren't global icon and foundation head. They were simply son and mother, sharing a deeply personal moment. When Michael stepped back, Dolores continued, I'm sharing this today for an important reason. My experience with cancer taught me something profound about respect. When you're ill, you learn quickly that outer appearances mean nothing. Your designer clothes won't help you through chemotherapy. Your fancy car won't make the pain less. Your status or wealth can't guarantee your health. She looked out at the audience with profound dignity. What matters is the care you receive from others. The doctor who sees you as a person, not just a patient. The nurse who holds your hand when you're afraid. The family who loves you through your worst days. That's respect in its purest form. Seeing the humanity in each person, especially when they're vulnerable. Dolores gestured to Trevor, who sat with his son in the third row. When that young man at the hotel showed me disrespect, I could have responded with anger. But my battle with cancer had reminded me how precious life is, how short our time can be. I didn't want to waste any of it on bitterness. She turned back to the audience. This foundation isn't really about hotel policies or school programs, though those are important. It's about reminding us all that every person we meet is fighting battles we know nothing about. Every person deserves to be seen, to be heard, to be respected. Not because of who they know or what they own, but simply because they are human. As Dolores finished speaking, the room erupted in a standing ovation. People who had come expecting a standard foundation event found themselves moved to tears by her revelation. Michael returned to the podium, his own eyes moist. "I had no idea, Mama," he said, his voice catching. "All those times, and you never said anything." Dolores smiled at her son. "You had your work to do. I had mine." In that moment, the true depth of the Foundation's mission became clear to everyone present. It wasn't just about teaching children to look beyond appearances or training hotel staff to treat all guests equally. It was about recognizing the fundamental dignity in every human life, an understanding that Dolores Jordan had carried with her through poverty and wealth, through illness and health, through obscurity and fame. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and shared their own stories, a reporter approached Michael. "Does your mother's revelation change how you see the Foundation's mission?" Michael nodded. "It deepens it. I thought we were responding to one incident. Now I understand we're addressing something my mother has faced her entire life. Something millions of people face every day. Being judged, dismissed, or disrespected based on appearances." He looked across the room to where his mother stood, surrounded by children, her face alight with joy as she listened to their stories. "And I understand better why she responded the way she did that night. With dignity rather than anger, with teaching rather than punishment. Having faced something as serious as cancer, she had gained a perspective that few of us have." Later, as the event wound down, Michael found his mother sitting quietly in a corner, watching the remaining guests with a contented smile. "Why didn't you tell me, Mama?" he asked, taking the seat beside her. "About the cancer, about the other times you were disrespected. I could have done something." Dolores patted his hand. "You were doing exactly what you needed to do, playing your best, living your life. A mother protects her children from worries when she can." "I'm not a child anymore, Mama. To me, you'll always be my boy," she said with a smile. "But you're right. I should have shared it with you. I just didn't want to be a burden." "You could never be a burden," Michael said firmly. "Never." Across the room, Trevor approached with his son. Marcus carried a small gift bag. "Mrs. Jordan," the boy said shyly, "I made something for you in art class." He handed her the bag. Inside was a handmade picture frame containing a photograph of Dolores with Marcus's class. Around the frame, the boy had painted small words: respect, kindness, dignity, worth. "It's beautiful," Dolores said, genuinely touched. "Thank you, Marcus." As Trevor and his son walked away, Michael said quietly, "You changed his life, you know." Trevor's. He was heading down a path of judging people by their appearances, their status. You showed him a better way. Dolores looked at her son, this man who had achieved more than she could have imagined when he was a boy, shooting baskets on that crooked hoop in North Carolina. "We all have the power to change lives," she said. "Sometimes with big gestures, like starting a foundation. Sometimes with small ones, like treating a stranger with dignity when they expect dismissal." She held up the picture Marcus had given her. "This is what it's all about, Michael. Not the recognition or the ceremonies. Just this. Touching one life at a time. Helping one person see differently." Michael nodded, understanding at last the full measure of his mother's wisdom. What had begun as a response to disrespect had become something far greater. A movement built on the simple, profound truth that Dolores Jordan had lived her entire life. True respect sees past the surface, to the worth within. True strength lies not in power or fame, but in the courage to treat every person with dignity, especially when they seem most different from ourselves. And in that understanding was a legacy far more valuable than any championship ring or endorsement. Deal. A legacy of respect that would continue long after the spotlight faded, touching lives in ways they might never fully know. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know which part of the world this story reached. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring real-life stories that touch the heart. We share new content weekly about extraordinary moments in the lives of both famous and everyday people. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family. Spreading stories of kindness, dignity, and respect like Dolores Jordan's helps create a more compassionate world for all of us. One simple share might inspire someone else to see others with new eyes, just as Trevor learned to do. Remember, as Dolores showed us, true respect isn't about fame or fortune. It's about recognizing the worth in every person we meet. Until next time, thank you for being part of our storytelling community.